People are inherently competitive. Sometimes we test each other in feats of physical strength or dexterity, or we might play a game to test our strategy and take chances. I could go on, but the point is we're constantly trying to find ways to entertain and challenge ourselves, and one another. It's a part of our lives, our dialogue, and for some people it's a career. So, how can we include games in more of our stories, and perhaps more importantly, when should we? Queen's Gambit is an obvious example of a show that does use a game in its story. Savas also comes to mind from A Song of Ice and Fire. Stranger Things begins with a group of kids playing Dungeons & Dragons, and Squid Game combines children's games with the literal brutality of debt. Then there's films like Tron and Free Guy, which, yeah, video games. There's plenty of examples out in the wild, and they tend to use games in one of two ways. First, as an obstacle in the plot, or second, as a vehicle for something else related to the plot. Chess works so well in Queen's Gambit because it's a major part of the story. Playing chess is folded into the plot, and with Beth's character, we get to see how she visualizes the pieces at night and how she uses the game as an escape in her youth. Chess completely shapes her life. That's the case in a lot of the aforementioned examples. Many of them use games as a centerpiece for the story's conflict. After all, without the games, Beth would be a totally different person, and Squid Game would just be Squid. If your story doesn't place that kind of importance on games, they can feel really hard to include, as with any element that isn't absolutely necessary to the plot or setting. However, there are ways to incorporate games without needing to make the game itself a vital part of the story. For that, we're going to have to use the second method, finding ways to relate games to the wider story around them. Let's look again at Savas, which Tyrion plays several times in the books. Without going into too much detail, many of us know the kind of character Tyrion is. He's intelligent, analytical, likes to win, among other things.
I drink and I know things.
But his goal isn't to win a game, it's to win politics. When Tyrion is playing Savas, it's never about the game for him. He plays the Game of Thrones, as he calls it, and spends his time with Savas intentionally giving his opponents bad advice, and using conversations around the game to uncover the player's real secrets. Martin uses Savas to show us Tyrion's ambitions, to reveal the true purpose of the group aboard the Shy Maid, all the while throwing in a little world building at the same time. There's even a ton of theories about how the games he takes part in might foreshadow future events in the series. It's remarkably efficient. There's plenty of room to create subplots or moments like this as people play with or against one another. Perhaps your character is like Tyrion and uses the game to better understand the people around them. Or maybe the game is part of a journey for that character. It might be a device for them to better understand themselves and apply a lesson learned during play later on in the story. And sometimes games are just a good thing to have characters do while they talk. I'm sure we've all read or watched a scene where the characters just didn't seem to do anything. They just stood there saying their lines. Now take that same scene and put it in a bar with drinks, music, and darts. What are they having to drink? What kind of music is playing? How are the characters reacting to what's happening in the game? A tense conversation might see each person progressively get less accurate with their darts as they become more distracted, ultimately missing the board entirely. Or they might get more focused, and end the conversation with a bullseye that seals the game and the argument in their favor. The game doesn't have to be a major plot point to make an impact on the scene or characters involved.
Barbecue sauce.
And I know we established a list of ways to use games, but that doesn't mean you have to follow it. Hide the Saltine didn't really have an impact on the main story in Scrubs, but it did help JD and Turk feel more like old friends, and it helped lighten the mood when things got a little heavy. And if you're coming at this from a world-building perspective, it's always fun to figure out what kind of games exist in your setting. What's played for fun and what's played at the highest level of competition? What are your world's Olympics? If you're creating something fantastical, consider how magic or dragons might be worked into sporting events. If it's a futuristic setting, what tech might have changed sports or enabled new ones? Games are a huge part of people's lives, and I think they should be a part of the stories we're telling too. They can push the plot forward or be a space to explore a character and their relationships, but they can also add a lot as part of the backdrop or just for the sake of a laugh.
Do you play?
Thanks for watching.